In this video, I want to talk about not waiting too long to start throwing a topwater bait, because right now we are kind of in that winter to springtime transition. So for a lot of the country, you are in a pre-spawn time frame. And during the pre-spawn, I have found over the years is one of the best times to go out and catch the biggest bass that live in your lakes on a topwater. Now, there's a lot of anglers that just don't take advantage of this because they think that the water is too cold, which I completely understand, and that is something that I did for a number of years as well. But in this video, I want to talk about a few situations. I also want to talk about just a few stories that I've seen that really just blew my mind. Now, real quick before we get into the video, I do want you guys to know that I just got another shipment of the fin fishing rod gloves in. These are a neoprene rod glove. I bought several about a month ago and they sold out relatively quick. So I went ahead and I purchased a bunch more because it seemed like you guys really want these. The neoprene really helps you to not get constantly tangled, constantly hooked in other baits, which is a humongous plus. So if you guys want to help support this channel, check out the rod gloves down below in the description. All right, now let's talk about topwater fishing. And guys, there's so much talk about forward-facing sonar lately that I feel like there's a lot of anglers that may be a little bit discouraged to even go fishing at times because they feel like they have to have forward-facing sonar to catch bass, and that's just not true. Bass are still doing what they have always done, and maybe even more so that you're not having as much pressure up there on the bank. And during the pre-spawn, I have found over years, there's a number of great baits in the pre-spawn, but one that truly catches the biggest fish in your body of water is a topwater of some sort. Now, there are two main topwaters that I'm going to talk about that I think are the best ones to use during the pre-spawn. But real quick, I want to tell you this story that actually has happened to me twice now, where this is when I really started to realize just how cold a bass would hit a topwater bait. Now, the first time was when I was like really young. Actually, both of these happened to me when I was really young. But the first time was during a Christmas when I got a ton of new lures for Christmas. I was probably like 15 or 16 years old. Well, we had this random warm day in February, and the ice just came off the pond, and I was really excited to check out my new frogs that I had just got. So I picked up a frog, and I wasn't going out there to catch any fish. I just wanted to see how this frog worked across the top of the water. And I remember casting this particular bait out there, and I worked it just really slow to kind of find the action. And as I kind of looked away for a split second, all of a sudden I hear, and I look over, and a bass had just hit my frog. I set the hook, the fish didn't have the bait, so I didn't catch the fish. But what it really showed me right then and there is just how cold a water bass will hit a topwater, because the ice had literally that day come off the water. I mean, there was no way that that water temperature was like, it was probably in the upper 30s, low 40s at best when you're talking about the surface temp. So I was completely blown away by this. Of course, I fished a frog out there around the pond, never caught a fish, but I still had one that blew up on it. And then fast forward a number of years, kind of a similar situation. I was testing out some new baits way late into the fall. I was bank fishing on a different pond, and I cast a jerk bait out because I was actually just testing out a jerk bait, but I got a backlash. And that jerk bait sat on the surface of the water for a minute, and while I was sitting there, a bass came up and hit that jerk bait, and I actually caught this fish. It was like a 3-pounder on this jerk bait that was completely sitting still on the surface of the water. And again, this was like into December where I was. I mean, the water temperature was definitely not even close to 50, like in the 40s, maybe in the 30s. So what I have found over the years is that bass are obviously predators. They will come up, they will hit surface baits even when you don't expect it. If they are hungry and they see something on the surface, it doesn't matter how cold the water is. They are willing to come up there and eat something. Now, with that being said, just because the water's cold, just because bass are willing to eat topwaters, doesn't always necessarily mean it is the right bait to throw. But what I am saying is that if you do get on a bite on this kind of this colder water temp with topwater fish, they tend to be the right ones. They tend to be really big ones. Now, I'm gonna let you guys know that this is something that I do in both the early pre-spawn springtime and the late in the year, like late in the fall time is what I like to do. And one of my absolute favorite top waters to throw is a buzzbait. And I know that this sounds a little bit counterintuitive even to what I was just saying, because both of those fish hit a bait that was sitting completely still. And most of us, when we think about a buzzbait, we think about it going relatively fast. But the thing with a buzzbait is you can fish these baits really, really slow. And that's exactly what I like to do with a buzzbait. I like to cast it out. This is a newer buzzbait to me. It's a Dirty Jigs buzzbait. And I like to buy these ones that look like this these days, where it's basically just a head that I'm gonna thread on a horny toad style bait on. That has become the only way that I really like to throw buzzbaits. The biggest reason, honestly, is because I like to skip a buzzbait a lot. Skip it under overhanging trees, skip it underneath of a dock, and having that big bulky plastic back there will allow you to skip a buzzbait a long ways, way longer than you would ever expect. Now, by using the frog, what I like to do is kind of keep my rod tip up. I'm gonna keep it a little bit higher than I normally do when I'm buzzbait fishing, and I'm going to reel that bait basically just enough to keep it on the surface. You're not gonna hear this bait being very, very aggressive. Like, you're not gonna hear it even slapping the water. It's a very slow reel. You're barely just turning that blade. You're barely keeping it on the top of the surface. That is the way that the fish like to bite a buzzbait in cold water. I'm talking in the upper 40s, even mid 40s, definitely in the 50-degree range. That is what I like to do. Now, what I have found to be best is always this bite is a bite that tends to develop when the sun gets high, when that water kind of warms up, because sometimes you get to these lakes in the morning when it's cold and the water temps maybe 42, 43. And I'm not saying that, you know, there isn't fish shallow, but a lot of times as that sun starts to penetrate the water and that surface temp warms up a few degrees, those fish will move up really shallow to sun themselves. So you'll be fishing in really small bays, really small pockets, and I'm just casting this bait out, reeling it very slow and targeting cover a lot of times that I can see. Maybe it's a riprap bank, maybe it's a stump, maybe it's just like the bare land. Okay, fish are just moving up shallow. And again, you don't want to work this thing too fast. Now, another bait that I like to throw a lot, and I kind of also mentioned this, is a frog style bait. A bait that I can keep in a spot for a long, long time. And the other reason that I like a frog is because if you think about it, a frog is actually a pretty subtle bait. If you think in comparison to a lot of the other topwaters that we have out there, you have baits like walking style baits and poppers. Typically they have a lot of rattles in them. They throw a lot of water. And a frog is not that way. Although we use heavy equipment, you know, and aggressive equipment to catch fish with it, a frog is a pretty subtle bait. You cast that thing out there, you work it maybe slowly across the surface, it's not making a whole lot of commotion. All you're really doing is displacing the surface water. So a frog has become a very good pre-spawn lure that I use a lot. Now I tend to use the frog a little bit more when the water temps are in the 50s. When I know that those fish are really, for the most part, shallow now, and you get into kind of that 53, 54, 55 degree water temp and above, basically I will throw this until they start spawning. Even while they are spawning, I will continue to throw a frog. And the big thing with the frog, kind of like a buzzbait, I'm not working it the same as I do a lot of times in the summer. I'm working this bait really, really slow. A lot of times I'm gonna walk it very slow and I will let it pause around an area that I think is highly, like there's a high potential to catch a bass. Like again, maybe this is a shallow laydown or a stump or something like that. I'm gonna work it very slow, let it sit. Excuse me. And you will be shocked at how many really big fish, like you will catch the females this time of the year with topwater baits. And it's a topwater. There's nothing more fun to me. Now, what I have found is that you don't typically get these overly aggressive bites. It's a slurp bite. Sometimes you don't even realize it, especially with the buzzbait. The buzzbait is a little bit bizarre because sometimes you won't even, because you're reeling that thing so slow, you'll literally just see the water just kind of whoosh, and you'll feel it more than anything. You'll feel a bass hit that bait, like you'll hear it tunk. It's almost like fishing a spinnerbait where you don't really see it, but you feel it. It's the same thing with the buzzbait. They don't typically explode on this thing because, again, their metabolism is a little bit slower. The water temp is a little bit slower. So guys, I'm telling you, do not wait to throw a topwater. Also, do not wait to pick up a rod glove. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'm gonna leave my most recent one right here. I will see you guys tomorrow.